so normally, if this was a real life meeting, I would be saying to you, I apologise, I'm the last thing between you and the bar, but I don't have to give that apology because we're not all going to the bar after this, sadly. We should do this again sometime and we can do that. So thank you very much to the organisers for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. When I was given this brief, I would normally give a presentation to an audience in a university or a collection of academics, so a fairly homogeneous audience. I was told for this it was a group of early career, but maybe mid-career researchers in the UK and other countries from universities, industry and other organisations. So that's quite a diverse group of people. So it's quite interesting trying to come up with something that I thought would be of interest to everyone. So without further ado, I'm Debbie Harding, I'm from BBSRC. And having two slides is great. Slides to advance. Is my slide advanced there? Yes. Yeah, getting a nod from Geraint, that looks good. So who are we and where do we come from? Basically, we are funded by Her Majesty's Treasury through our parent department, which is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS. And it provides funding to our parent organisation, UK Research and Innovation. And it's worth pointing out at the moment that having had the comprehensive spending review a while ago, that is where the government dispatches funding for the next 3 years into its departments, or 1 year if you're particularly unlucky. The BEIS has had its settlement for a while, and as far as I know, UK Research and Innovation, or UKRI, is either about to or has just got its settlement from BEIS and decided how much we're going to get. But of course, then that will entail UKRI deciding how much individual research councils get, how much it keeps centrally for us to bid into, and so on. So that's kind of where we are in terms of getting our funding. So we have funders as well as you. And to say a little bit about UK Research and Innovation, and I think it's about to launch into an animation, which is going to show you about all of its, the parent organisation and all of the different research councils involved. So I'll move through that without making you feel too seasick, but we invest over £8 billion a year in research and innovation through 9 organisations. So let's move on from there. Plant science in UKRI. Most people tend to think that BBSRC is the only funder of plant science. And while we are the primary funder of plant science within UKRI, funding research on plant architecture and function, genetics, genomics, biotic, abiotic stresses and so on. And we do have a specific interest in crop plants and other managed plants. But NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, also funds research on plants in the natural environment, particularly their role in ecosystem services and the impact of environmental change on those services and plants within the environment. But that's not it. Plant science also features in the portfolios of EPSRC, Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, the Science and Technology Funding Council, and also Innovate. That's usually in response to very specific areas and is usually very applied. So, oh God, and I've just been told my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, Debbie, you're cutting out a little bit. So if you take your video off, then it'll probably sorry, your video off, then
yeah, okay. Yep, it's been fine today, but yeah, fingers crossed. So all funders have information on their websites, and we welcome inquiries about opportunities and applications, and I'll go on to say a bit more about that later. So who are BBSRC and what we do? Well, the thing really is invest in world-class bioscience research in UK units. But a key thing that we do is we also invest in bioscience training and skills for the next generation. because without investing in the next generation and pulling them through, there would really be no point in having a really good portfolio in science, because you'd have nothing to follow it, nothing to underpin it. We also try to derive the widest possible social and economic impact from our bioscience. And we also promote public dialogue on bioscience, because we really do want to bring the general public with us in terms of scientific innovation. And we have a collection of priorities, and these go from the very fundamental things, understanding the rules of life, which is really understanding what actually happens within all living organisms and what makes them tick, and also funding transformative technologies to really unpick these rules of life. We have some strategic challenges around areas of science, and we also build strong foundations, and that's through people and talent, one of the things that we're nurturing through this meeting today and over the next couple of days, through ensuring that there's appropriate infrastructure, and through collaborations, partnerships and knowledge exchange. So to look a little bit about those strategic challenges, the one that will be of most interest to the plant scientists here today is bioscience for sustainable agriculture and food, which is all about delivering more food from fewer inputs. There's also bioscience for renewable resources and clean growth. And the renewable resources are essentially going to be plant-based, or largely plant-based, so there are opportunities there. And the other area that we have is bioscience for an integrated understanding of health. Why do we have strategic priorities, you might ask? We fund research across the whole remit of BBSRC, but we're particularly keen to fund research which aligns with our strategic priorities. As mentioned, the key one for you to think about really is sustainable agriculture and food. And we have strategic priorities to address issues which are large and complex and are likely to remain a priority for a long time to come. These are areas that we're not going to be able to solve with a few £1 million of research funding. They're going to take a lot to solve. And it's not just going to be a UK issue either. So the problem of producing more food using the same amount of land with fewer inputs is not going to be solved anytime soon. So that is going to remain a priority for us for quite a long time. And a lot of our targeted initiatives often align with these priorities, how your work fits with these agendas. And we have a variety of mechanisms by which we can support plant science within BBSRC. The primary area is within responsive mode, which is the area where anyone who's eligible to submit a grant application can apply on any topic. Committee B is the committee that looks at plant science and crop science, and the majority of plant science goes there. Committee C will look at genetics and genomics of plants and also developmental biology within plants. So there's two committees that will largely cover plant science. We also have targeted initiatives. The ones that I've been involved in have been on tree health and plant biosecurity, pulses and oilseeds, and the current one that I work on is on bacterial plant diseases. We sponsor BBSRC institutes, and the ones that are particularly interested in plant science are the John Innes Centre, Rothamsted Research, and IBERS, now part of the University of Aberystwyth. And through those institutes, we fund institute strategic programmes, which are large areas of funding to address strategic areas. A lot of people, when they're looking for plant science funding within research councils, tend to focus specifically on the research initiatives. And while that's important, there are a lot of generic calls and schemes that are also entirely applicable because they run across the whole remit of BBSRC. So people will often overlook things like the Alert Mid-Range Scheme, International Partnering Awards, bioinformatics and biological resources. All of these are open to plant scientists to develop what is quite often infrastructure for plant science, which is a really important thing to think about. And as well as supporting research grants, we also fund studentships, fellowships, networking activities, And we fund workshops and meetings such as this one. So it's worth thinking about those generic areas. And to think about how we develop strategic priorities in BBSRC. We take advice from a variety of sources to develop our strategies and priorities. And these include strategic advisory panels, where we have groups of people advising us on specific issues, and those are usually sitting around those strategic priorities. We organise time-limited working groups. We have consultations and surveys from time to time. We run workshops, we take advice from subject experts, and we talk to other funders and policymakers on a regular basis. So we're using bottom-up approaches from panels and working groups, and top-down because sometimes we get directives from UKRI and BEIS in terms of what we need to do. And we use all of this to develop our strategy. So this ensures that we focus our funds in appropriate ways, and we're taking consensus advice and not just being lobbied by individuals or small groups of people. So in terms of influencing BBSRC, as our future leaders, you can have an influence here. And there are several ways that you can get involved in helping BBSRC to develop its strategies. So you can apply to serve on our strategy panels, and every so often we will have a call out for people to serve on strategy panels. If you are appropriate for those, you can also apply to serve on our funding committee's necessary strategy development. If we ask you to contribute to working groups, please get involved. If there are consultations and surveys around, please get involved with those. And that's not just necessarily things that BBSRC launch. Jane Langdale organised a plant science consultation sometime last year, and that's collected information from a large number of people in the plant science community. So BBSRC is just having a look at some of the findings that have come out of that. You can also have direct contact with BBSRC, although we would welcome constructive comments and suggestions of things that we can do rather than just complaints about what we don't do well, because we hear that an awful lot. But constructive, useful feedback is always very welcome. And we value input from all parts of the research community, not just academia. So please, everyone in the research community, do feel free to comment and get in touch. But do bear in mind that the plant sciences community, and particularly plant health community, are not the only communities that are contacting us and advising us what we need to put money into. And everyone is all trying to get a greater share of the pie, and we can't do everything that everyone requests. So please do bear in mind that there are lots of people out there, and we have lots of different calls on our funding. Research funding doesn't just involve academics. People will sometimes say, well, I'm not an academic or I'm not eligible to hold a research grant, therefore can't be involved. Not true. It's true certain people can be a principal investigator on a research grant. That doesn't mean that other people can't be involved, because on a grant you can have project partners who are people or organisations involved with the project who are contributing something such as staff time, access to facilities or data, or possibly use of equipment. And those are very valuable contributions. Quite often those can be access to things that aren't available in in the academic community, particularly in universities. So those are, and that can be also expertise that isn't available. So that can be particularly important. And there can also be collaborators from organisations not eligible to be involved in projects, but providing valuable expertise. And that's often from niche organisations that wouldn't be eligible to hold grants, but yes, can provide very valuable contributions. And for some areas of research, such as the bacterial plant diseases one that I'm involved in, one of the things that we needed from the very start was engagement with stakeholder groups, and that can include farmers, landowners, plant sellers, all kinds of different organisations. That is positively encouraged, and that goes across the board for everything. Having people involved who are able to make use of your research outputs is very important. So looking to the future, BBSRC will always need more research in plant health, but it's likely there will be specific priorities within this area. And thinking particularly about plant health, crop protection is always going to be needed, especially as some of the chemical agents that have been used to control pests and diseases are withdrawn, or people don't want to use them anymore. So perhaps integrated pest management strategies might become more important, or alternatives to using chemical agents for control. Climate change means that crops are going to need to remain healthy in more extreme environments. So resistance to drought and possibly flooding, possibly within the same field in the same growing season, and high temperature are going to be needed. And net zero is climbing up the UK government's agenda, and this is no doubt going to fit into UKRI priorities in the future. So please think about all of those issues, think about those for the future. I'm getting another warning to say my internet connection is unstable, but I can still see other people moving, so hopefully I am still connected. So I'm not sure whether Geraint would like me to take questions about BBSRC now, or just move on to a few hints and tips and ideas about how you can improve your opportunities in the future.
You keep going, Debbie, and we'll take questions about everything at the end.
Okay, and make some comments to you, the potential future leaders in plant science. And what on earth can I say when I don't even do plant science research? Well, over, I won't say how many years in BBSRC, I've seen a lot of applications, and these can be for research grants, fellowships, workshop funding, places on sandpit events, and probably other things that I've forgotten as well. And over the years, you get to see a lot of these things, and you get to see some common mistakes that people make. And when I give this kind of presentation, it always feels really patronizing. And I always think, oh, everyone will have always thought of all of these things. And then people come up to me afterwards, sometimes even professors, who say, I wish somebody told me that 20 years ago. So hopefully a few of the things that I say here will be of some use. And whether you're looking for research grant funding, applying for a new job, making a case to hire an extra technician, or pitching an idea to an investor, there are some things you can do which will help you, and there are some mistakes that you can make. Which, thinking about this whole idea was about future leaders. A leader isn't just somebody, or isn't somebody who knows everything or has all of the required skills already, but somebody who's willing to learn, and somebody who's willing to pass that learning on to others. So one of the things I would encourage you to do after these sessions this week is take anything that you've learned and anything that you think is useful, and share that with your colleagues, share that with other people in your lab, other people in your networks, and pass on that learning. So increasing your chances of success in anything really comes down to, first of all, read the call or the job spec or the instructions carefully. Are your ideas really within scope of this? And it's very easy to look at the title of something or the first few lines and think, yeah, that's for me, right, I'll go full steam ahead with this. Actually check that this is really what you think it is. Check that you're eligible, because eligibility criteria can vary over time, and they certainly vary with different funders. Read the instructions carefully, because not following the instructions is one of the major reasons that people get rejected. And put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going to be assessing your grant application, job application, fellowship, workshop application. Think about what they're actually looking for. What do they want to know about you? What do they want to know about your project? What do they want to know about your past experience? If you really think about it and think about what they want to know about you, that gives you some indication of what you need to put into your application. And in the words of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you have the phone a friend round. It is really useful to ask sense. Sometimes if you've been working on some text for 2 months, you can't really see the wood for the trees. You can't really see what potential mistakes you might have made. Getting a fresh pair of eyes to look over it, ideally, if they can proofread it as well, that would be useful. It really can help. It really can make somebody say, I can't really see quite what it is that you're trying to do here. What's the ultimate goal here? If somebody's had a successful application to the scheme that you're applying to, the employer that you're applying to, whatever, ask for their advice. Have a virtual coffee with them. I would say have a coffee, but you know, can't really do that at the moment, but have a Zoom chat, have a virtual coffee. Get their advice on it, because they can probably be a source of really useful advice and knowledge. And getting advice from a trusted friend or colleague can be valuable, and sometimes avoids mistakes, but do temper that with the funders or employer's website for the up-to-date rules, because sometimes they will tell you something that was true 2 years ago when they applied, but things have changed. So do make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information. If in doubt, ask. Please, please, please ask. Do this well in advance of the closing date to save wasting time. If you ask us about something we say not about 2 days before this, you can waste an awful lot of time. And please barely get an instant reply, especially while people are working at home, juggling caring responsibilities and so on. Sometimes on dodgy internet connections, which mine suddenly seems to have gone dodgy this afternoon. Do bear in mind you might not get an instant response. We funders, we want to be asked questions. We expect to be asked questions. That's why we put contact details on everything. That's what we're here for. So if you're not sure whether your planned research falls within scope, you can send us a short description of it to us to help us advise you. Because if we get a brief description of a scheme, or it's more appropriate for a different funder, we can tell you, we can give you that advice. So please do make use of us, do contact us. And yeah, again, read and follow the instructions. It's amazing how many people haven't followed the instructions, and it's a reason why things get rejected. If you're asked to include specific documents, please make sure you include them. We ask for them for a particular reason. And if you follow the instructions, they will usually say what format, rules on page length, because if we have things that are on page length, usually they will get sent back. If you're asked to demonstrate experience of something, provide examples of something, or provide evidence of something, it's likely you're going to be assessed on that, so please do provide it. And a colleague told me that he was looking through job applications and had somebody who appeared to work in exactly the right area for that job. But because the job spec asked for candidates to demonstrate experience of something, and this person hadn't bothered demonstrating experience or just hadn't read the instructions clearly, he couldn't interview that person because they just hadn't answered the right questions. So please do read the instructions and follow the instructions. Do exactly what it is that we want. If we say we want something sent in, there's a reason, send it in. And submit your applications well in advance of the closing date. We're not responsible for if your internet goes down or you can't submit for some other reason. So there's no prizes for submitting it 5 minutes before the closing date. Get it in well in advance of the closing date. And there's plenty more that I can say, but I've already gone on, I think, for quite long enough. And this was supposed to be an interactive session. So please do ask me questions now or contact me afterwards. My email address is up there, debbie.harding@bbsrc.ukri.org. Do get in touch, do contact me. I'm very willing to answer questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Debbie. Okay, yeah, a little wave like that. So, so thanks so much, Debbie, for your talk, battling on through the sometimes amusing slowing and speeding up of your internet connection. So
yeah, my internet is it's finely attuned to when I need it to be stable, and that's when it goes down. The last time I had a really disastrous one was when I was interviewing on internet, and after the first candidate, my router decided that I'd obviously had enough internet for the day.
Maybe that was the right candidate then, who knows. But okay, so we've got a couple of questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So Dana McGregor has asked a question, and she says, so many of the generic schemes are tailored at people who already have funding, and she highlights the International Partnering Awards. Obviously, responsive mode is available to everyone with a new investigator uplift, but are there any issues about getting over this issue where you can only get more funding if you have funding already? Is there anything you think that can be done to prevent that sort of issue?
Yeah, the partnering awards are a special case, and they're really designed to build on a specific research project. So you couldn't really do that without having the projects in place. A lot of things like the generic equipment ones, they're not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to have funding. We're very aware that there is a problem getting into the game and getting the first ladder, the first rung on the ladder. That's why we developed the new investigator uplift. Yeah, contacting the funder in advance can definitely help. If you're not sure about the best way to get into to these schemes, do contact us. It's worth saying that in terms of responsive mode, which is our flagship funding mechanism, we are funding at around 23% of applications. So a large number of applications that come into us, there is absolutely nothing wrong with them, but we simply don't have the funding to fund them. So a lot of people will, they'll put in applications, say, well, I didn't get funding, so BBSRC doesn't like my area of science, or BBSRC doesn't like me, or they don't like my institution, or there's some other reason. Frequently, it's just that we had some high quality, absolutely excellent applications at the top of the list. There's a lot of really high quality science below it, but we just simply didn't have the funding available to fund those applications.
Mm-hmm. So let me follow up on that then. About resubmission policy. I know there's been some discussions about people's ability to resubmit grants that have been rejected first time, not because they weren't any good, because there were incredible other quality ones there. So is there anything coming down the line, do you think, from UKRI in general about the possibility of resubmissions? How things would have to be changed for resubmissions? What's your feeling on that?
Well, I'm unfortunately old enough to know where the resubmission policy came from, because we didn't used to have a policy on resubmissions, and it used to be the case that if people didn't get funding, then they would essentially put more or less the same application back in, sometimes with a couple of extra lines of text, sometimes with a couple of paragraphs changed. And we'd have to send those applications back out to reviewers, often a completely different set of reviewers, and we would get comments in, we would put them to the committee, and they would go through the full peer review process and not get funded again. And I've actually seen applications go through the entire cycle 3 times. And it was decided that this was actually not an appropriate use of reviewers' time or committees' time, or in fact the time of people in the office, or for that matter, the people writing the applications, because they simply weren't going to get funded again. So this is why we instituted the policy of you cannot resubmit exactly the same application, or near as damn it the same application, because if it was unsuccessful last time, it's pretty likely it's going to be unsuccessful. It's going to be slightly less timely the second time around. So unless something has changed dramatically, it's unlikely to be funded again. And I don't think that there is any likelihood of UKRI changing any policies, or individual councils changing policies on that in the immediate future. And I've heard the argument that it is tough for people who are just below the funding cutoff, that they don't have an alternative. And it's true that if you went to a panel on one day, they would put some applications may be slightly above the cutoff, slightly below, and the cutoff might change, or the order of applications might change on a different day with a different panel. Generally, the ones that float to the top will always float to the top. The ones that don't get funded will always not get funded. And no scheme is ever going to be completely fair. I think it's reasonable to say that we've got a system that is generally as fair as we can make it, but nothing is ever going to be fair all of the time.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Obviously, if you have 10 superb grants and only 9 get funded, then that 10th one is in a kind of a difficult situation for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of more questions. So one's from Jazzy, and she asked if grants have criteria change, is there a published justification for the changes, and can these decisions be challenged?
If criteria are changed, yes, that's all put up on all of the funders' websites, and that's where it comes down to reading the assessment criteria, reading the eligibility criteria carefully before you apply. I've got a feeling there's something out there, I have to confess I'm not quite sure where, that will tell you of the general changes. Can decisions be challenged? No, if we've changed criteria, then those have been changed, and that's unfortunately that's the way it is. I'm not quite sure what sort of decisions you would want to challenge there, but in terms of changing criteria, for example, eligibility, no, we wouldn't take challenges to those.
But they haven't been decided by just the people in the office or whatever. So any changes you've consulted widely.
Changes to things like eligibility criteria will have come down from usually from a UKRI level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So Katrina Dainton asks whether if you have a grant and it isn't funded, do you receive constructive feedback if in that case?
All applications or unsuccessful applicants can receive feedback, yes.
Okay. Okay, so a question from Sarah. She says, for early career researchers, it can be useful to see how UKRI works from the inside. So, which is the best way to be part of this? Oh, hang on, sorry. So yeah, about panels, so about grant panels. Are early career researchers and professionals eligible for grant panels, or how can they get experience in that?
We don't normally take postdocs on grant panels, purely because we're looking for the depth and breadth of knowledge that you won't necessarily have built up in your the first part of your research career, because you won't just be assessing applications in your own specific area. You'll be looking at applications across quite a wide range of science. So we're looking for the more rounded scientists who can sit on our panels. And for the strategy things, we're looking for people who will be able to take the long view about research. How to get involved? I would say contact BBSRC or NERC or any other council. Explain that you want to know more about how BBSRC or your chosen council works, and we'll see if we can come up with ways of getting you involved in this. I'm not sure of particular mechanisms that we might have at the moment, but it's certainly something I can take back to my colleagues in the training and development sections. So I'd certainly be interested in thinking about ways that you can get involved. But yeah, we're happy to give presentations of this sort to institutes or institutions. We used to go out and talk to universities in the day when we could actually go out and do things. I don't see any reason why we can't do this kind of thing by Zoom and talk to people and give longer presentations about best ways to approach getting funding. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask a final question, see if you don't mind. One last question. So we've focused kind of on academic questions at the moment. So a lot of people here will be not working in the academic environment, but a really good example of where BBSRC is involved with traditional academics is in the bacterial plant diseases program that that you lead or you coordinate. Can you give a bit of advice about how other organisations can be involved with BBSRC to promote funding? Funding calls in the same way that the bacterial plant diseases. So how could RHS or AHDB be involved with BBSRC to promote a funding call which is relevant across sectors?
Well, we are in touch with AHDB throughout a number of schemes, so they're involved in various things. RHS, we have involved in a couple of activities. Whenever we have activities where we want to get views from the wider community, we tend to engage with them. We publicise calls on our web. Well, we now publicise them all on the UKRI website, where there's a harmonised funding finder. I would advise organisations where they see schemes or calls that they think that their staff could be involved. If in doubt, do get in touch with us. Ask if there are ways that RHS or AHDB people can be involved, and I'd be very happy to talk to people. They're always for calls. There's always a contact detail at the bottom. It's usually a generic email address, but whoever is running that particular scheme will always be happy to talk to anyone about ways that they can get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know a lot of those decisions are obviously taken quite high up, but I mean, the bacterial plant diseases program is a really good example that, forest research is highly involved with that, and they are not a traditional area where, BBSRC or UKRI funding goes into. So there's been obviously conversations to allow people from that organisation, for example, to be involved. So,
well, that was a specific aspect of the Strategic Priorities Fund that made public sector research establishments eligible for funding. So that was a very specific case. Again, it comes down to reading eligibility criteria for each call.
Absolutely. Okay, so thanks so much, Debbie. Let me pass back to Celia for her closing comments at the end of day one here. Thanks so much.